Hey everyone, welcome to Crime Weekly News. I'm Derek Levasseur.
And I'm Stephanie Harlow.
And we're here talking about another topic, a crime that's in the headlines. You guys are all talking about it, so we have to as well. Tyre Nichols, we want to talk about it, especially as a former police officer. Definitely wanted to cover this. I was mentioning to Stephanie last night that I was waiting for Crime Weekly News to have this conversation. I could have put something out on social, but wanted to do it here with you guys. So we're going to give you some of the specifics of the case for the small group of people who may not be familiar with what's going on this last week. And then we'll talk about it for a few minutes, but not too long. We're just going to give you most of the facts and we'll go from there.
Yes. So 29-year-old Tyre Nichols was pulled over in Memphis, Tennessee at around 8:30 p.m. this past January 7th. He was stopped by police officers on suspicion of reckless driving, and the initial statement from the Memphis Police claimed that a confrontation occurred as officers approached his vehicle, and then Tyre ran away, and then another confrontation occurred when they kind of like tased him as he ran away, tackled him, tried to cuff him, and I think it's something like 11 or 12 minutes that they are trying to cuff him while they are beating him senseless, basically. An ambulance was called after he complained about shortness of breath, and sadly on January 10th, the TBI, which is the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations, announced that Tyre Nichols had succumbed to his injuries and died. Now, 5 Memphis police officers were fired and charged with second-degree murder. Their names are Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, Emmett Martin III, Desmond Mills Jr., and Justin Smith. And recently, the Memphis Police Department has confirmed that a 6th officer, Preston Hemphill, was also taken off duty in relation to this incident, and a 7th, who hasn't been named, has also been taken off duty in relation to this incident. Also, 2 EMTs and a lieutenant with the Memphis Fire Department have been terminated for violating policy and protocol in their response to the Tyre Nichols situation. So actually, this just, we're recording this on a Monday night. This just came out 2 hours ago. EMT Basic Robert Long, EMT Advanced Jamichael Sandridge, and Lieutenant Michelle Whitaker failed to make an adequate assessment of the patient when they arrived on scene. So the big thing is the body camera footage that came out this past Friday. It's pretty bad. It's really, really bad. It's really hard to watch. And it's been compared to the brutalization of Rodney King by the LAPD in 1991. Like I said, the video is very hard to watch. I believe it comes in like 4 separate segments because I think it's from separate body cam footage, but it's hard to watch because it's hard to watch multiple people punch and kick someone who has no chance of fighting back, no chance of outnumbering or, out like fighting the people who are attacking them. Like anytime it's 4 against 1, 3 against 1, 2 against 1, 5 against 1, that's incredibly difficult to watch because you don't understand why it's happening. Like you don't understand why when it's just one person that these police officers are attacking him in this way. The videos show the police officers kicking Tyre at least twice in the face, striking him at least 3 to 4 times with a baton in the upper body area, punching him at least 4 times in the face, punching him at least 2 more times in the upper body area, and kicking him at least twice in the abdomen. A New York Times analysis of the video footage found that police officers deployed an escalated spiral of conflicting orders, repeatedly demanding that Tyre show his hands even though other officers had his hands behind his back while others were punching him. So it is weird because according to that analysis done by the New York Times, it looks like these police officers issued 71 orders within 13 minutes of trying to handcuff Tyre, all of which were contradicting and confusing. So, like, he literally didn't have a chance. And you can hear him in this video. He's telling these police officers, like, I think you guys are doing too much. I'm just trying to go home. And he's just, he's being, like, beaten as he's saying this. And he's like, clearly doesn't understand. They're saying, lay down. He's already laying down. Things like that it just doesn't make any sense. And they're all yelling at him at once. And at one point, as he's being, like, beaten and clubbed, he's screaming out for his mother, which is really hard to listen to and to watch. So yeah, it's really tough. And then once medics were on the scene, they stood by for more than 16 minutes without administering treatment. So it's hard to understand. And you can hear the police officers basically talking throughout this, like very violently and aggressively, saying things like, I hope they stomp him. They're threatening basically to beat him senseless. But then you also, after, they have beaten him, and he's just like lying on the ground, you can hear them bragging about it and talking about their own injuries from the fight. I'm using air quotes if you're not looking straight at me. And at one point, what happened is he basically was just laying like flat on the pavement, and then they dragged him across the concrete and like propped him up against a squad car. And then they started like talking amongst themselves while they just stood there and watched him, and he's cuffed. And then every so often, one of the officers would like shine their flashlight on him, or, if he would like slump over, they would like go over and like push him back up into a seated position. It's really hard. It's hard to watch. So these 5 officers that were fired, they were reportedly part of a neighborhood crime fighting unit called the Scorpion Unit, who reportedly do have a bad reputation among the locals. Rodney Wells, who is Tyre's father, said he's heard on multiple occasions that people are being assaulted by these Scorpion Unit officers. And another Memphis resident told WJHL News 11 that he was also apprehended by this unit in a very aggressive manner, similar to Tyre's situation just days before Tyre's death. So just days before this happened to Tyre. So once again, this is just speculation. I don't know. This is very new. I don't even know why they did it. There's some speculation and rumors saying that they told Tyre's mother it was because he was like super strong, and they couldn't understand why he was so strong, and he was on drugs and this and that, but none of that has been proven at this point, and really nothing has come out specifically in details besides this video and what's happening in it. So yeah, it's hard to watch. I didn't want to watch it. Oh, and then they did a preliminary autopsy commissioned by Tyre's family, which showed that Tyre suffered extensive bleeding caused by a severe beating. And there is a photograph that was taken before Tyre died on January 10th. He's in the hospital. He's in like a hospital bed. He appears to be unconscious, and his face is just bruised and swelling. Like, it's really hard to understand how this could have happened. And, we were talking a little bit before the cameras rolled, and I said, I just don't understand. They know they're all cameraed up. They know they all have body cameras on. Why would they do this? It's not as if this is something that you can even look and say, like, we thought we were right. It's 5 against 1. I don't understand.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. It's tough to watch, and I'm not going to sit here and give the play-by-play because I think most of you have watched it. And if you haven't, you should as much as you can, just to be educated, just to be informed, just to understand what people are talking about. But to summarize, it was horrific. As a human being, as a police officer, it's unacceptable. And I don't think it's any surprise to anybody, if you've been following Crime Weekly for a while, that I'm obviously pro law enforcement. It was my job for a very long time, and I'm proud of that. But I'd like to think that I call out the bad ones when I see them, and these are clearly 5 bad cops, and they're not the only ones. It's not like this isolated incident where in the whole country there's not other guys out there like this. And it's one of those things where it's not acceptable. We should never be okay with it. Just because, in my opinion, most cops out there are trying to do the right thing. Sometimes there's bad ones. That's not an acceptable excuse either. We have to do better. We have to train better. We have to have better background checks for these individuals. And I was saying to Stephanie the other day when we were discussing how we were going to cover this Crime Weekly News is more about the facts, and we're talking about what you guys are talking about because there's a lot of information out there. Not all of it is accurate, and it's presented as fact. And so we want to kind of give you some of the facts like Stephanie just did, and then kind of weigh in on it. And I do think I have an interesting perspective because although I haven't been a police officer in over 7 years, I was one for 13. And I was a patrolman for a very long time as well. And I worked in community units like the Scorpion Unit, but it was never called the Scorpion Unit. It was called the Community Policing Unit. Seems like a much more suitable name.
Yeah, right.
But there are incidences with use of force where because of so if it's hypothetically, if it's me, I'm a bigger guy, but if it's me against someone who's a lot bigger than me, I may be justified in not going hands on with them because physically speaking, they may be able to beat me up in a heartbeat. So it's one of those things where it's not a fair fight because they're 350 pounds and I'm 200 pounds and they're MMA fighter and they're going to kick my ass all over the place if I try to fight with them fist to fist. So In that way, I can articulate using a baton or using a taser, because common sense would say to you, Derek's going to get his ass kicked. But in this particular case, you have 5 police officers, and they're bigger guys. But even if they weren't, you can't justify using use of force weapons like batons and tasers when it's 5 against 1, unless he is Bruce Lee. And even then, I don't know if it would justify it. There's no way to articulate why you felt the need to do this, and the excessive force that was used, the amount of times he was punched. They're probably going to say it was an attempt to gain compliance, but as Stephanie said, there was contradicting commands being given, and he wasn't even physically able to obey any commands anyways, because as Stephanie said, he was being restrained. So how can you comply with commands, whether they're lawful or not, if you're physically incapable of doing so? And so I feel like there was something a lot deeper going on here. These guys had an axe to grind. I don't know if they knew Tyre. There's been some speculation that there may have been a pre-existing relationship with one of the officers. I haven't confirmed that yet. I know, Stephanie, you're nodding your head. Have you heard that as well?
I've heard it, but I haven't confirmed it, and I tried. But it's just like the rumor mill, online. People are saying, I know them, and I'm from the neighborhood, and I know this, but you can't confirm it. And especially with things like this, when they go so public, you just don't know. And this is this kid's life. I'm not trying to muddy the waters any more than they need it to be.
Exactly. And it may come out, and if it does, we'll cover it. It's one of those things where we don't know, but I did want to cover a certain angle on this just from my own personal opinion, and it may carry no weight with you, and that's fine. But I do feel like some of you want to hear the detective perspective, because I've walked it and I've talked it, and I will tell you, and I was telling Stephanie this, and I'm going to give the shorter version because it's a much longer conversation, but what most people don't know is I actually retired as a sergeant. So I was in a supervisory role, and I was a sergeant for 3 years. But in the beginning, when I was a sergeant, we had a plethora of applicants to choose from. And when I got hired, we had over 300 applicants who had applied to be police officers, and we might have had 3 positions available. I think when I got hired, we had 5. And if you had one thing in your file, and I tell you, the background check to be a police officer when I got on was so extensive. They went to my high school, my colleges, my neighborhoods, any job that I worked at, spoke to managers of employers of mine when I was 16 years old, just to see if there was any sign of aggression, violence, short fused, in addition to the other things like education. But it was mainly about, hey, is there anything in his past where you disciplined him and he talked back? Just something that could be a sign of things to come if I was given a position of power, right? Because if you're doing it when you're the pizza kid, you're going to do it when you're a police officer. So anytime we had that, and I personally conducted some of these background checks, if your friend, if a former girlfriend from when you were 7 told us you yelled at her or you did certain things, honestly, fair or not fair, you usually got booted from the process. And I've personally gone on record in my files and said, yeah, you know what? When he was in high school, it seemed like there was a couple times where he would just start a fight out of nowhere. Yeah, it could be just a kid being a kid, but not suitable for a cop. Failed. Off. And he wouldn't, or she wouldn't get hired. Later in my career, which was 2017, it was already changing. Obviously law enforcement has a different, set of eyes on it now, justifiably so. In many cases, when we're having instances like this, you have less people coming out to be police officers. Funding has come away from law enforcement and police departments, and the whether it's right or not, the salaries have gone down. And when I was leaving, maybe we had 100 people apply, if that. It was probably less. And I can personally tell you that there were people where I would do backgrounds on them, and for one reason or another, I wasn't, fond of them, and I wouldn't recommend them. And that's as far as we go. We turn in our folder, we give our recommendations, and then we walk away from it. But some of those guys got hired, and there was nothing I could do about it. And they probably shouldn't have been. Now, thankfully, I do know of one of them that did not make it as a cop. He didn't do anything terribly wrong, but he just couldn't cut it. We'll just say that. And he was let go. But overall, there is a new wave of people applying, and frankly, they're not the most qualified candidates. And so I don't know what we can do about that, because that's more of a, I guess, a governmental issue as far as financing and all that. I'm not going to go there, but I will say this for the people who are currently on the job, the cops that we already have. There are people out there, political figures, politicians, whatever you want, that are saying, this is a perfect example. We need to pull away money from police departments. We need to reallocate it to other places because it's not working. And all I can say is this, take it with a grain of salt. Look at Target, for example. Okay. And I love Target. You can take away from the training at Target and you may have the quality of employee go down, but those individuals aren't in the position where they can take someone's life legally and get away with it. Okay. So you can afford for that to happen there. If you start taking away even more money from the training at the police departments, there's going to be less training. There's still going to be cops. They're still going to hire them because whether we like it or not, there's a minimum manning and more than likely police officers aren't going away entirely. So you're going to have a lesser quality officer getting even less training. And to me, that only suggests more problems like this, where you have people getting on the job who shouldn't be there in the first place. And then you have this lack of training and this lack of accountability. And now they're out there on the streets doing things like this. So I don't know what the answer is. I do know personally in my own heart, I don't think the answer is less training. I think these people were underqualified, undertrained, and shouldn't have been cops in the first place. And by not having more systems in place to remove people like this and to identify them, I feel like these problems are going to happen more often. So take that for what you will, but that's my 2 cents on it just from my own personal experience. And you know, do with that what you will. I'm not trying to push it on anybody, but that's just my own experience as a human being and as a father myself. And I know what's happening right now isn't working. And I don't know if we have an answer, but I just say, you know, evaluate the information yourself. Most of you are adults that watch this channel, and come up to your own conclusions, because there are people out there that might have an agenda when things like this happen. And so you just got to keep that in mind.
I mean, listen, at the end of the day, what's coming out, we don't know, right? It could be people making allegations. It could be people just saying things and it's not true. We don't even know much about Tyre himself. But what I do know is he didn't deserve to die. You know,
100%.
From what
he didn't deserve any of that.
None of that. I can't even.
He's not a big guy, by the way.
He's not a big guy. He seems like, I mean, like, I hate saying he seems like a good guy, but like just from pictures of him, he seems like he's always got a big smile on his face. He's happy-go-lucky. He was taking his parents said he was taking pictures of the sunset and he was on his way home, and you can even hear him in the video. He's not being aggressive. He's not being like mouthy. He's not doing anything that would prompt this sort of violence. He's not even being like, oh, you bunch of assholes, why you keep it? He's like, I think you guys are going a little hard right now. I'm just trying to get home. Like, it broke my heart because, you know, I'm a mother. If that was my son, like, I would be burning the world down right now. I don't care what he did, right? I don't care if he just came back from shooting heroin in the park. I don't give a shit what he did. No human being deserves that. There's no reason for it. I don't understand why it happened. It looked like they did have some personal thing against him. It looked like they did have an axe to grind, because I literally don't understand how 5 grown men, and like you said, these aren't little guys. They're big ass guys beating the shit out of him as he's on the ground and begging for them to stop. I don't understand how one human can do that to another human. So like a stranger, right? Like a stranger on top of it. Like, it feels like there has to be something personal there, or else these 5 people are just psychopaths, honestly. Like, I don't see any middle ground where it's like, this was just a normal police stop, and because he ran away, they thought they had to do this. Like, I don't understand where we went wrong from point A to point B. Like, what happened in between that we're not understanding here, that you thought that this was not only like warranted, but okay. And that you would be okay talking shit to this guy on camera while you're beating the crap out of him and then bragging about it afterwards. And like, I don't understand. Like, they knew those cameras were rolling, right? They know they have body cameras on. It leads me to believe that, and I mean, you said like, well, they didn't think they were doing anything wrong. Like, that's why they were okay with them doing it. Not that you think they weren't doing anything wrong, but it's a problem that they thought they weren't doing anything wrong. So the whole Memphis Police Department has to be like, you know, looked at from the root down, because who's training these people that they think this is okay? Is somebody training them like this? That's my question.
Yeah, it's a false sense of security that they think because they're wearing a badge, they're going to get protected because they're the ones writing the report. And they're finding out the hard way that's not the case. And, you know, you said something there and it's true, but I would even take it a step further and say, let's say for a second, Tyre was not a good person. Say he was a big piece of shit. Let's say that even during that interaction, he was horrible. He spit in multiple cops' faces, called them every name in the book. There's going to be some level of force to gain control of him. But once you have control of him, when I think he was 160 pounds, something like that, the force stops. Force is only used to gain control, to gain compliance, to get that person under arrest. If that's the case, obviously, if he spit on them, it would have been an assault. But what they did isn't in any book on policy and procedure when it comes to use of force. That was an assault. That was a murder. That's what that was. It was a homicide. Plain and simple. They beat that man to death. And they're charging him with second-degree murder because obviously they're working under the assumption that they weren't trying to kill him in that moment, but their actions led to his death. And so that's fine. They beat that man because they were trying to hurt him, and the result of their actions was he died, and now they have to pay the price for that. So regardless of what Tyre's behavior was in that moment, and it sounds like he was an incredible human being, but even if he wasn't, this still is not okay. And again, this isn't something that I'm saying, oh, this is an isolated incident. This is happening across the country. I'm not in the same camp as some people who believe this is the majority of police officers out there. And I know I'll get comments about that. I don't believe that. And Stephanie and I have talked about that before, on camera and off camera. But I do think we can't just allow these things to keep happening. So one thing we can do is when we do see it like this, hold them to a level that is the highest standard possible in the eyes of the law, to not only show that set a tone for what happens to people who act like this when they're given this type of power, but also to hopefully have it act as a deterrent for anybody else out there who's currently in law enforcement and may think about doing something like this, or anybody else who's contemplating getting into law enforcement so that they can do things like this. And that's a start. But I really do think it goes back to accountability within the police departments, training, documenting incidents that may escalate to this. My hunch will be that when we start getting into the jackets of these individuals, this was not the first time that they've had complaints against them when it comes to excessive use of force. And so you have this documentation, and yet they're still on the road. And so there's a chance to get them out before this happens. But with this lack of checks and balances, this lack of accountability, this lack of retraining, if they do offend like this, that's the problem. And that's what we have to fix. And I'm not in a managerial position like within government, but I don't think saying, hey, we're pulling away more money, figure it out on your own with less is going to be the answer. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, from what I can tell, at least 2 of the officers who've been arrested and charged with second-degree murder have something in their past history where they've been accused of using excessive force. So, yeah.
No, there you go. It's terrible. And I feel bad for Tyre's family. We're thinking of him. This is not something that's good for the law enforcement community, but also our society as a whole. You would think in 2023, we wouldn't be seeing this anymore, and yet we still are. And we have to learn from it, and we have to change it instead of just saying we're sorry about it. And I think covering it like this, making sure that even though it's been covered all over social media, we're using our platform to inform it. We have a lot of overseas people who listen to the show. They might not know about this. Well, now they will. So I think getting the message out there, having people currently and formerly in law enforcement speaking out against it as well helps. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. Any final words, Stephanie?
No, like you said, our thoughts to his family. I mean, I don't even want to think about what his mother and father are going through right now. We feel very, very, very bad for them. And it's like words can't even touch it. I don't even know what to say. It's like, sorry for your loss. That's not even going to touch what's happened here. Like, their child was stolen from them for no reason, and rightfully so. They're going to fight. They're going to fight for his memory and for justice for him, as they should, and we will support them in that every step of the way. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Hey, one final thing.
Oh, yeah.
Body cams. Everyone, every department, every officer. I said this when I was a police officer. all need body cams. The biggest problem with the
They
body
really
cams,
acted like a deterrent, right? Acted like a deterrent in this case.
but even so, at least we have this afterwards. But I will say the biggest problem with body cams, so anybody who doesn't know, like, why doesn't everybody have them? I tried to get them from my department before I left. Data storage, the cloud storage to store all the video, millions of dollars to store it, because these certain groups have basically figured out, monopolized, whatever you want to call, where the cameras themselves aren't expensive. It's the downloading of the video footage, because you have to keep it for months in case it goes to court.
Yeah.
And it's tons of money. So just back to what I'm talking about here, where it's like, okay, small police department like I was in, we have a very small budget and they want $3 million for data storage for the video. Where do we get it? Where's it coming from? That's like the whole budget for the city. So again, not trying to be Debbie Downer. I don't know what the answer is, but that's something where you want to take away money. I think every department should have the money to get body cams. I don't think there should be one police officer on the street without a camera attached to his chest, period. So that's another thing. But yeah, you're right. We appreciate you guys joining us. We hope everyone stays safe out there, and we will see you next week.
Bye.